For generations, we've believed that Native Americans lived in perfect harmony with nature. But what if this image we cherish is only part of the truth? Join us as we uncover a history layered with survival, respect, and hard decisions. It's time to go beyond the myths and discover the reality behind Native American environmental practices. For years, we've heard the tale of the ecological Indian, a Native American so perfectly attuned to nature that he only takes what he needs, shows respect for every plant and animal, and lives in total harmony with the earth. It's an image celebrated in movies, books, and even environmental campaigns. But how much of this portrayal is based on fact, and how much is a romanticized myth crafted to fit the modern imagination? In today's video, we're going to unravel the origins of this stereotype, dive deep into historical practices and beliefs, and explore how Native Americans truly interacted with their environment. This journey will take us beyond the simplistic narratives of harmony and show us the human, sometimes contradictory, side of Native American life. So get ready to see a different side of history, one that respects the richness of indigenous cultures without reducing them to a stereotype. The idea of Native Americans as guardians of nature has its roots in several cultural and historical sources. Early European settlers often wrote about Native Americans as noble savages, people who, untouched by modernity, were seen as morally superior due to their primitive way of life. However, the stereotype as we know it today didn't fully emerge until the 1970s, a period marked by intense environmental activism in the United States. During this time, major campaigns like Save the Whales were gaining momentum, and organizations such as the Environmental Protection Agency were established. In one of the most famous environmental ads of the 1970s, known as the Crying Indian commercial, a Native American man sheds a tear while observing the pollution of America's landscapes. This powerful imagery forged a strong connection between Native American identity and environmental responsibility in the minds of many Americans. Ironically, the actor in the ad was not Native American, but Italian American, underscoring how this image was constructed and manipulated. Indigenous beliefs and practices regarding nature. To understand the true relationship between Native Americans and the environment, we must look beyond stereotypes and delve into their spiritual and practical views of nature. Many Native American cultures had deep animistic beliefs, seeing plants, animals, rivers, and even rocks as possessing spirits. This animistic worldview shaped their approach to the natural world and informed how they interacted with it. In the eastern woodlands, for example, some tribes believed that hunting, gathering, and farming were all acts of giving and receiving. They would thank the animals they hunted and conduct ceremonies to honor their spirits. This was not simply environmentalism as we understand it today, but a complex relationship that intertwined spirituality with survival, practical uses, and ecological impact. While Native American practices often reflected a deep respect for nature, it's important to remember that they were also practical people who needed to survive. Some tribes engaged in activities that had substantial ecological impact. For example, many indigenous communities used controlled burns to manage forests, a practice that not only cleared land for crops, but also promoted the growth of certain plants and improved hunting grounds. These burns, while ecologically beneficial in many cases, also demonstrate that Native Americans actively modified their environment. Not every tribe or individual adhered strictly to the idealized principles of taking only what is needed. Some Native practices could be intensive and disruptive, especially when resources were abundant. For example, overhunting of species like bison and the extensive farming of certain areas were recorded in various regions. The Maka tribe and whaling controversy. One of the most illustrative examples of the complex relationship Native Americans had with nature is the story of the Maka tribe from Washington state. The Maka had a tradition of whaling that spanned hundreds of years, but by the 1920s, they had largely ceased hunting due to changes in whale populations and new regulations. However, in the 1990s, they began pushing to resume whaling, citing treaty rights and cultural preservation. This led to a fierce legal and ethical battle. Environmentalists argued that whaling was a cruel and outdated practice, while the Maka defended it as a part of their heritage. The controversy deepened in 2007 when a group of Maka hunters illegally hunted a whale, sparking public outrage and debate within the tribe itself. Some argued that this act was about cultural survival, while others saw it as a violation of both environmental ethics and traditional values. The incident reveals the complexity of indigenous relationships with nature, a blend of respect, necessity, and sometimes tension. The pitfalls of the ecological Indian reducing Native Americans to mere environmental stewards can be harmful. This stereotype, while positive on the surface, is limiting because it overlooks the full humanity of indigenous people. By framing Native Americans as perfect custodians of the earth, we ignore the complexity and variety of their cultures, and we risk perpetuating a view that denies them the same capacity for conflict, innovation, and change that we attribute to other groups. Furthermore, the ecological Indian stereotype is often used as a moral standard to critique modern environmental policies, placing an unrealistic burden on indigenous peoples to represent an idealized, harmonious relationship with nature that was, in reality, far more nuanced. So, what can we learn from Native American ecological practices without falling into stereotypes? First, indigenous knowledge systems often emphasize interconnectedness, a concept that has relevance for modern environmental science. Many Native philosophies consider ecosystems as wholes, where each part affects the others, a perspective that aligns with today's ecological principles. However, we must approach these lessons with respect, recognizing that Native American practices were shaped by specific cultural, environmental, and historical contexts. Rather than adopting these practices wholesale or using them to critique others, we should use them as inspiration to rethink our own relationship with nature. The true story of Native American environmental practices is one of balance and adaptation. By looking beyond stereotypes, we can honor indigenous cultures for their contributions to ecological understanding without imposing romanticized ideals on them. History is rarely as simple as we might like it to be, but it is precisely in its complexity that we find its greatest